When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadabji, your podcast host, a practicing clinical social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 44. What happens behind the scenes of success? To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing an amazing and daring guest who is appearing on the show again. A big warm welcome to Asante Houghton. Asante is a mental health advocate devoted to changing the world. He is focused on amplifying the stories of everyday people to illuminate gaps in the system while working to build bridges between community members and policymakers in order to find solutions to challenges together. Asante is the co-founder of the Reach Out Response Network, an organization advocating for non-police-led mobile crisis emergency response. Asante is also a 2-times TEDx speaker and a Center for Addiction and Mental Health Difference Maker, awarded with the distinction of being one of the top 150 mental health influencers in Canada. When Asante is not speaking and advocating, he is designing, managing, and facilitating peer support training programs at Stella's Place, a youth mental health service agency in Toronto, and hosting the web show Cypher, which turns peer support stories into original songs by Juno-nominated musicians. Young at heart, silly, self-deprecating, and able to find a sports analogy for virtually anything, Asante tries not to take himself too seriously despite being engaged in the serious work of change-making. Hi, Asante. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast. Welcome back.
It's so good to be back. I'm very excited.
I feel so blessed that you have come back on the show for another round today. And, I'm also really thankful for your willingness to share another part of your story.
Of course.
Yeah, and I feel so much joy to know that I have your support in taking this stance with me to help break barriers of mental stigma. So thank you so much for being here.
No, of course. Honestly, it's such an honor for me. So I know you just said you're grateful, but I'm very grateful as well.
Aw, that's so sweet, Asante. Thank
Right,
you.
right.
Okay,
I love it.
so now I know, Asante, you full well know what this podcast is about, but I'm just going to
Yeah,
do a small recap, right? So
yeah,
we're just bringing forward untold stories because we know that whether people go through whatever they go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else, we know no matter what that story is, there is impact on a person's own mental health. And part of that story remains tucked away. So that's what this podcast is about. And this platform serves in a way to break those barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in society. And then today, together, you and I hope that we can, continue to encourage people to share and tell and have them sort of tap into their own daring ways and really allow people what they normally would have reservations for expressing to be able to, unravel that experience for themselves. And then, of course, bringing forward that trend, it's called
Mm,
the mental beauty rethink.
okay.
Yeah. Now, I know you know all about mental beauty and we've chatted about it before, but I'm curious about if there's like any additional thoughts that you would like to share about this trend that I'm putting into action.
I don't know. I think for me, I find that there's providence in being vulnerable.
Hmm.
And, when we think about nourishing ourselves in a emotional, psychological way, however you want to, whatever term you want to use, I really think that a lot of that comes from, the connections that we have with others, but also with ourselves.
Hmm.
And those connections really can't exist as deeply as maybe we would want them to or need them to without being vulnerable with ourselves and being vulnerable with others. I think people hear vulnerable and they think weak or need to be pitied or, just
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And I think in a very opposite way, vulnerability can be really strong. And it can be honesty, it can be truth.
Hmm.
And that's what I think I really mean when I say vulnerability, because you really expose yourself, I think,
Yes.
when you tell the truth and you're honest. And I think when you live that way with yourself and with others, it really does create the conditions I think that are required for us to be in a space mentally and emotionally where we can see ourselves and grow and love ourselves and all of those things.
It's encompassing of everything, each individual's truth.
Hmm.
Yeah, I really like how you were able to articulate that piece about vulnerability and defining that for yourself and how you walk that path of vulnerability. This is incredible. Okay, so I am planning to get this interview started. So, ready or not,
Yeah,
here we
let's do it.
go.
All right.
Okay, so Asante, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. What would it say?
Every hero is just a person.
Every hero is just a person. Okay, you're gonna have to say a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's easy for us to look at the people that we look up to or admire and create images in our heads of who we think they are, feel they are, or who we want them to be for us. And I think a common thing that we're experiencing these days, especially as social media is becoming a thing where we can interact with celebrities and well-known people, is we're learning that people are just people. They're flawed. They have
Mhm.
insecurities. They have idiosyncrasies. They have different parts of themselves beyond the thing that they're known for, etc. But I think the challenge is that when you're in the public eye as one of those people, then it becomes hard to be a nuanced person because of the images that everyone else have built in their head
Mhm.
about who you are or who they would like for you to be. And it becomes really challenging when you're being truthful and honest, but people don't believe you because what you're saying or doing doesn't fit into the narrative that they've built for themselves about you
Mhm.
in their own heads.
Yeah. So that's huge. And I know we're about to unpack that as part of your story.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. Every hero is just a person. I find it very grounding when you say that. It's almost like you're taking something that has been taken in many different forms, right? Like the narratives that you talk about that people create, those preconceived
Hmm.
notions, and then you're bringing it back to say, but we're all just people.
Hmm.
Right. So, without further ado, tell us what your untold story is all about. Tell me all of it. The who, the what, the when, the where. I want to know all of it.
Well, last time I was on, we talked a lot about my growing up and, certain things that I didn't really necessarily talk about publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And an extension of that is the last 2 years of my life have been very public.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So I've been on the front page of newspapers or a newspaper, I guess. I've been on a billboard in Toronto. I've been on TV a lot of different times, both locally and internationally and nationally. Same with radio. Just I've kind of been in the media a lot, right? Just the advocacy work I was doing
Mm-hmm.
with Reach Out Response Network.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of being able to do public advocacy is being in public.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we form this organization and then we have volunteers and we bring on, a board of directors, and things become challenging because myself and my co-founder, when we got involved, for us, we just had one goal in mind, and that was supporting Toronto to have a new way of responding to mental health calls, and that way being not with police officers as first responders, but with folks who are more equipped, mental health workers, peer workers, etc. Folks who are more equipped to respond to, someone who needs a mental health check, right? A wellness check. So that's what it was all about. And I think, around that time, George Floyd had just happened, Black Lives Matter was blowing up.
Right.
There was just a lot going on in the world in terms of people wanting things to be different. Defund the police was a huge conversation. Those conversations definitely helped us to have the conversations that we wanted to have and talk about the things that we wanted to talk about.
Right.
But at the same time, we kind of got swept up in all these other conversations. And a lot of the people that who became volunteers with us, they were also swept up in those conversations. And a lot of media people were also swept up in those conversations, and people on social media, etc. And at times, I think many people really just didn't quite understand what we were advocating for and thought we were advocating for things other than what we actually were. And then us taking flack in the advocacy community for not supporting defund the police publicly and talking about those things. And, obviously we have our views on those things, but, and in keeping with what we've done before, I'm not going to share those things publicly
Right.
now, but we had one goal in mind, and we kind of had to navigate a lot of different things in order to get there. A lot of people didn't like how we navigated, even though we actually did arrive at our goals, and we feel we did it in a way that did not compromise our values as people. And I mean, there's definitely going to be some people out there who disagree with that, but to the best of our ability, with us being very busy people, we had a thing that was a side gig that took up 40 to 60 hours of our weeks that was outside of school or 9 to 5 work. It became really challenging to
Well,
do everything right.
you're spending every moment doing something active. And it sounds like, you had to keep really focused on the goal of what you were trying to achieve, knowing that there was all these different things happening on the sidelines and all these different sort of things that you had to respond to that were unexpected. And how do you keep the focus of the goal of what you're trying to achieve and then entertain all of these other things, all these conversations that get swept up from the side and things that are misinterpreted? That must have been really draining and exhausting as well.
Yeah, it's really hard when you like one of the things that we experienced over the last couple of years was continuing to say that our number one goal was to make sure that people who are in a mental health crisis were having mental health workers show up and not the police.
Mhm.
That was it.
It was as simple as that.
It was that simple.
Mhm.
But it always seemed like that got lost on so many people and just created a lot of conflict for us. And the other piece too is that we worked pretty heavily with the city,
Mhm.
the entity of the city, and city councilors and things of that nature. Didn't matter what political party they belonged to. We did some consultations with Toronto Police Services. So we worked with what some people would say is the enemy, right? And that, I think, didn't rub people the right way sometimes. And I understand it and I get it. But for us, we were just kind of like, we're going to do anything that we need to do in order to access the people we need to access to deliver the information that we felt was important. And if that meant that we had to meet with some folks who maybe we didn't even want to meet with, that was just part of it, right? I think that one of the things about being in a position of leadership is it's not about doing what you want to do. It's about doing what's necessary,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And sometimes what's necessary does not make sense to everybody.
Right.
And it's really hard, I think, for people who are in disagreement with whatever the necessary is,
Mhm.
for them to hold two viewpoints at once, which is the folks who are doing the leadership piece, they probably have arrived at whatever decisions they're making. There was a thought process there, right?
So while it's easier from the outside in to just question and say, "Well, why did they do that?" or "Who does that?" or "What sort of a decision making was that?" They don't realize what has unraveled and what has sort of been part of that journey. What are all the other hidden missing pieces that don't meet the public eye, right? So it doesn't always make
Well,
sense.
that's it. That's it, right? And and I've spoken to Mayor John Tory about this one time. That's the mayor of Toronto,
Mhm.
and he said that one of the things that he had to learn quickly, being the mayor, is that no matter what decision he makes, people are going to be mad.
Yeah. There will be unhappy people.
Yeah, and that's something that I've had to learn to deal with. But
Mhm.
It's really hard sometimes when you're working so hard. It's hard to have the mental energy to process those things properly. So sometimes they dig a little bit deeper than you would like them to, and sometimes maybe they don't actually. And then people see you as dismissive, and it's not that you're dismissive. It's just that you have 12 hours of meetings in that day,
Mhm.
and then you have to make dinner for your family and spend some time with your wife and kids, and then also respond to all the messages from your friends that you've been receiving all day,
Right.
right? So you're not just the work person. There's a whole other side of life. I've gone through a lot in my personal life over the last 2 years. My relationship has definitely experienced challenges. I mean, we're really good now, I think, but there were definitely some challenges there because I was so busy.
Right. Like, how available were you emotionally, and were you present? Could you stay grounded in the relationship? There must have been a lot of exhaustion as well.
Yeah, of course. One of the ways that I started trying to make more time for myself is by sleeping less, right? So I figured that I could spend more time with my family during the evenings if when they went to sleep, I stayed up late and I did more work.
So your solution was, I'm like a superhero. I can do everything. I don't even need sleep now. So it's all good now?
I mean, that's what I tried to do, but
Okay.
obviously that didn't work,
Okay.
right? I mean, that fell apart quick, but
Okay. Sleep is good, Asante. Sleep is good.
I love sleep.
Uh-huh.
Don't get me wrong. I just,
Just something had to give, and you felt like that was the only thing that you could do.
that was it.
Okay. There was so much. Every part was important.
Exactly.
Did you feel at any point that everything that you were doing was a priority?
What do you mean when you say that?
Well, I mean, you had your full-time job, and then you've got this
Yeah.
reach out work that you were doing, and you're the
Yeah.
co-founder, and you're going to meetings, and you're like on headlines, and you're doing interviews and delegating tasks and containing any upheaval that's come up from stuff that's come into the public eye, or having to
Hmm.
manage or mitigate with the board of directors and volunteers and everybody, and then, your own family and all of that. So did you feel like everything was a competing demand? Everything was a priority and it was just hard to manage?
Oh, 100%.
Mhm.
It became a thing where I honestly, and this was probably part of my own doing, I just stretched myself too thin.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
if there was 5 things I needed to get to, there was only enough time for me to get to 4 of them. So I was just whatever was missing each day, I would just alternate throughout the days or throughout the weeks, try to keep up that way. And a lot of apologizing to people
Right.
for dropping balls or doing things slowly or doing things late, and really just trying to like still manage the relationships well enough that people wouldn't think I suck,
Like damage control. Like,
right? All the time.
what did you learn about that whole piece about priorities and how not everything can be a priority? Because I'm assuming that you learned that lesson.
Yeah, I definitely learned that lesson. I think it's really important for everyone to take a look in the mirror at themselves and think about what is the most important thing for them.
Mhm.
And, what is the thing that if they lost it would hurt the most or do the most damage, right? I got to a point where I had to start doing that. And it was probably a year into that journey where I started thinking, this is not working for me. You know what I
Right.
mean? But I kept going because I felt like it was still necessary to be involved in the way in which I was involved. And
You were too far in to like stop.
that was it. And and the train was not at its destination yet. So I couldn't jump off.
Mhm.
About a year into it, I was like, man, this is too much and it's taken me away from my family.
Mhm.
For me, family is really important, and it's important because I grew up with not a lot of family around me.
That's right.
I came to Canada with it was just my parents and my 2 older brothers, and then my parents split when I was about 5 years old. I came to Canada when I was young. And then, my father was mostly absent from my life until about 13 years old. And then he became completely absent in my life for the next 8 years after that.
Mhm.
And, my mom, she was someone who, by the time I was 10 years old, was working and going to school and just so busy that I just didn't see her
Right.
for years. And then she got really sick when I turned 14, 15. And then I was seeing her, but not in her best state because she was really struggling with some mental health
Yeah.
challenges. And I was,
Yeah, we talked about this. I remember. I do recall.
right.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I don't really have extended family
Right.
in Canada.
Right.
So I don't really have family connections. So,
So these are your precious gems. You don't want to lose handle on that.
right.
That's the thing, right? Asante, when we make everything a priority, nothing really becomes a priority. Nothing really can be a
Exactly.
priority. But it sounds like as soon as you got connected to yourself and recognized that, hey, the most important thing for me is my family, to be able to say to yourself,
Hmm.
like, my family comes first, that must have recalibrated how you were operating after that.
100%. Once I got to that point, I realized what you just said is when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And within that nothing was my family, right? And doesn't mean that they weren't a priority at all. It just means I wasn't able to show up for them the way that they wanted me to and the way that I wanted to. And one of the things I really wanted to do when I became an adult was to have a functioning family,
Hmm.
especially after having a child. I had my first when I was young, right? And you kind of see the value in that stuff, right?
Sure.
And then I'm kind of like, yeah, I kind of do want to just have kids around, and I do want to have a partner and these kinds of things. And the older I got, the more important those things became to me because I started getting closer to the families of my friends or, my wife now who has a big family, and I see how important it is for them. And when I'm around them,
Hmm.
I just see how much joy is derived just from having family, but not just joy, but support
Hmm.
and the really important things that keep us going as human beings and keep us resilient and keep us moving through the challenges of life. Because a lot of my wife's family, they're not rich. Like a lot of them don't have a lot of money, right? But they're so happy though. Like if you meet these people, like geez, they're happy,
Hmm.
and it's because they have each other,
Right.
right? So these things became an example to me that, hey, this family things, there's something here, and maybe there's something there that is deeper than what I was trying to derive happiness and joy from when I was in my early to mid 20s.
That vision, right? That vision that you had started to shift.
Exactly, right?
Hmm.
And it became less about just me and more about others. But the thing is, that was like an intellectual thing for me and also an emotional thing, but I
Hmm.
didn't know how to do it because I had no examples
Right.
growing up.
Yeah, you didn't have those mentors or the living examples. You didn't have any parental figures who could show you that
Or just even being a part of a
community.
group of cousins or exactly
Right.
that kind of thing, having aunties and uncles stop by, spending a lot of time with your grandparents. I didn't have any of that growing up, right? So
It was unfamiliar. It was a foreign concept for you. You might have heard about it at school when kids talked about it.
exactly. Then now when I get older and I'm working a lot in my head, because my vision of myself as a family man was put food on the table,
Right.
right? Then just over the last 2 years, realizing that that's not enough. While those things are appreciated
Mhm.
by my family, they also want time with me.
Right.
Time where I'm not worried about what email I need to send or oh, I can only watch one episode of this thing because I have to hop off and do something work wise. So it's not just that you don't have the tangible hours, it's that even when you're using those hours to spend with your family, you're not fully present because you're thinking about whatever problems happen throughout the day or things that you have to address next day, next week, next month.
Right.
And, I'm still a busy
Of
person, right?
course.
But for me, stepping away from the public advocacy
Mhm.
has honestly, I feel a huge weight off of my shoulders and I feel a lot more free
Mhm.
than I have in the past couple of years. And I just feel like there's a greater flexibility in my life and my time. And
So you were really yearning for that flexibility and you didn't even know it.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
One of the things that's really important for me is like I want to be able to show up to my kids like recitals and sports
Of
games
course.
and concerts and events and all of those things and I was doing that before the pandemic. Then I got really busy during the pandemic.
Mhm. And then all those other things were canceled, so we learned to live life without them and cancel them from our schedules, right? Like,
Exactly. And then I was just canceling my family from my schedule.
mm,
I was filling up, some of these other hours with just work stuff. And I became swept up in it really quickly because there is a part of it that feels good when you're doing work and it's being publicly recognized as important and you're arriving at the goals that you set out for yourself. Like I have a legacy item in my life now and I haven't touched 40 years old yet. Potentially, my name's going to be in a history book somewhere, as being a part of something big,
mhm,
something that might transform the city of Toronto.
mhm.
That's huge,
Yeah,
right? I mean, maybe I won't be a part of a history book. I don't know, but
maybe
I
you
mean,
will.
anyone who dives into it, they'll know I was there, right? And a lot of people, they really want to have that legacy thing, and I think that's something that I wanted. I remember being 16 years old and saying to my world history teacher, I said to him that I'm going to do something one day that's big and something that's going to be memorable. And I kind of feel like I did something along those lines now. As I was chasing all of that, though,
Hmm.
in a way that became selfish, because that became just about me and my ego and what I wanted, right? That wasn't necessarily layering in what was important for me as well, which is the family. And in saying all this, obviously, again, it feels good to do the successful thing, but of course, I really, really cared about the thing that we were doing. It wasn't like I was just doing it for the clicks or whatever.
It was a passion project. It was something you
Of
really
course,
had put your heart and soul into.
I experienced the system in a violent way,
Well, that's a very intense way to describe it.
but I did. So I wanted to change it. Right. And I've seen so many people experience the system in that way
Mhm.
as well. So I wanted to change it. But, going back to where we were, you get swept up in, that passion, but also the spotlights are on you. And that's kind of cool sometimes. But who gets lost in all of that and became, my family and my friends who were just on the sidelines, and friends saying to me that I don't talk to them about anything anymore, and everything about my life they find out on social media.
Wasn't as personable anymore. It became impersonable.
Yeah, I was just not really there, to be honest.
Mhm.
I was more there with my immediate family, but it became a thing where I used to visit my mom like once a week ish.
Okay.
Then it became a thing where I was seeing her once every 4 or 5 months.
Right.
And that's just one example. I was hanging out with my friends. I mean, it was hard because of COVID, but even then, when we were able to do things outside, I still wasn't able to really find time for people. And, with my family, it was kind of like, oh, let's do something on the weekends, but I was too tired
Mhm.
from all the work that I was doing. I wasn't the person I wanted to be anymore.
Right.
And I had to reconcile with that. And at first, there was a lot of guilt and a lot of remorse. And guilt and remorse, particularly guilt, I think, is one of the things that's really challenging about it is that it paralyzes you.
Now, was it guilt or was it shame?
I Shame as well, definitely,
Mm,
definitely. I think both.
okay.
I was so ashamed of not being the person that I wanted to be for the people that I loved the most.
Mhm.
And then also, it's really strange because people on social media or in the media, they write and they say these things about you that if you let it will kind of gas you up and blow your head up a little bit.
Right.
I don't think I was impacted by that too much, but what I'm really trying to say is that people on the outside see all the good stuff,
Right.
the achievements and the media appearances and the accolades.
Yeah.
What they're not seeing is, that I'm having difficulty managing all of my personal relationships.
Mhm.
And that's because I'm working so hard. And then sometimes people don't value that you are working that hard because you're stretched too thin and you're dropping balls in different places. I used to sometimes think, am I like a lazy person? And then I would take a step back and look at how I used my 24 hours in a day. And I'm like, no, I spent all of this time actually doing
Yeah.
things.
But they were different, right? It's like you were working so hard and you were trying to make that mark. It's like you were landing everywhere, right? You were leading
Hmm.
by your own passion, your own drive. So if all your
Hmm.
life this is the stuff that you've been wanting to work on and it's all coming at you or to you in different directions from different angles, you probably were just trying to soak it all up because, like, okay, I'm in, I'm game. Okay, this is good. And then
Hmm.
you're getting all swept up, but not because of ego. It's from what you're saying, it's all from the lens of passion. And then
Hmm.
it's being misunderstood by people. And when people misunderstand the thing you're most passionate about, I'm wondering if you felt devalued.
100%. That hurt me a lot.
Right.
It really hurt me a lot.
It broke my heart when you said, didn't end up being the person I wanted to be for the people I loved the most, and I'd been working so hard to do this thing. I just was like, oh, Asante. I can't imagine what that must have been like for you to have that
It
moment.
it it was really hard because you're in conflict with your friends and your family, your parents, your siblings, with everybody.
Hmm.
It just really felt like I know that they had legitimate reasons to be upset. I just did not know if they understood why I was making the decisions I was making, in the sense of there was a window of opportunity for many changes in society. It's about the zeitgeist
Right.
and having that window of opportunity. So for me, I was like, this has to happen now. It can't wait 5 years, because in 5 years, the momentum's going to be
Right.
gone. The momentum's gone now, to be honest. No one is knocking down on my door to give me media interviews anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because we're not, stuff isn't happening. A lot of stuff is happening. Big stuff is happening. It's just that the momentum has shifted to other places, as it does in the news cycle. Defund the police and Black Lives Matter and police brutality, those aren't the big conversations right
Yeah.
now. Maybe not the most prominent ones anymore. So for me, I was like, this is a window of opportunity, and I need to pour everything I can into this,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that I can't put this
It
off.
came with insurmountable stress too, right?
Yeah.
Insurmountable stress.
Yeah. And and then, the other part of it is when the burnout starts to kick in,
Mm-hmm.
you start to, you don't, it's not actual dissociation, but it feels like that, because like I'm working, I'm working, I need a break, and then I kind of just, I veg out on the couch, watching basketball, or like Netflix. It looks like I'm not doing anything, but it's like I'm trying to recover
Yeah.
because I'm just so tired.
Right.
In the moments when I was not sleeping well or sleeping enough, it was because I was staying up to do that kind of stuff, and just to kind of feel like a real human,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes to go on social media and see like what's trending on Twitter, or whatever, just so I have some connection to the outside world, outside of just this work that I'm
Right.
doing all the time, every single day, for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was a hard thing to manage. It was a thing that I think some people understood but still didn't like, and I think a lot of people didn't understand it and didn't like it. That I was living my life in this way, and then got to a point where I didn't want to live that way anymore either,
Mm-hmm.
because the sacrifices were too great in terms of my relationships, but then also my own personal health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who, when I was experiencing probably the greatest career growth and visibility in my life,
Mm-hmm.
I was depressed for half the year
Mm-hmm.
in 2021.
Yeah, tell me more about that. I'm really curious about how your mental health was affected. And, you're talking about burnout, and now you're sharing parts of feeling depressed. Do you feel comfortable sharing more about it?
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the depression started to kick in around April
Mm-hmm.
of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And what was happening around that time was, with Reach Out Response Network, we were very busy trying to onboard or select and interview people to be the board of directors. And then in my 9 to 5 job, that's a very busy time, in the sense that two cohorts start to overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Also at my job, there was a lot of turnover in terms of managers and other staff at that time. So I was having to fill in other areas too, outside of my regular roles. So I just had so much on my plate. And, my wife found out she was pregnant, and, or we found out we were pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
just a lot was happening.
So, like a lot of stressors at one time, right?
Yeah.
Lots of stressors, and
Yeah.
they're firing from different directions, but all at one time. So tell me more about the depression. What did that look like to you? So I understand all the stressors that kind of got you to that place in April of 2021. But what was it like? How did you know you were feeling depression or depressed? What did you experience?
It wasn't an overwhelming sadness.
Okay.
It was me trying to escape from everything.
Escape. Okay. Like was it like a withdrawal?
Yeah. I just did not want to talk to anybody unless it was work related.
So it was like this complete exhaustion.
Yeah. My text messages, emails, LinkedIn messages, whatever, DMs, they were all just piling up all the time. And I would see them coming in, and I wanted to respond to them, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And then I felt terrible because I wasn't responding to them. And I felt like I was just letting down my friends and family and my people. I was letting them down all the time just by not being present.
Hmm.
And I was actively just trying to run away from the accountability of those things, because I knew I wasn't doing well enough. And I think for me, the escape was me feeling like I didn't have the emotional wherewithal to have the necessary conversations, or to say the things that needed to be said, or to hear the things that needed to be heard. And so for me, it's like, I'll just run away from it, to the extent that I literally, I, I took a 5 day trip to Vancouver, literally to the other side of the country, like
Okay.
as far as I could go.
Did it help?
It did actually.
Hmm.
It helped a lot. It helped me to understand what was going on with me. It's not like I came back and I was like super happy all of a sudden.
Right.
of but it helped me to understand what was going on and that escaping was not the way. So
Mm.
I had to slowly start reintegrating into my life. Then I started doing that over the summer and into the fall of 2021. And to some extent, I think I'm still doing it now in the winter of 2022 as we're talking.
Hmm.
But I think it's a process and it's going to be a long one. And there's still some relationships in my life I need to sort out. There's still some parts of the relationship with myself I need to sort out, I should add as well.
Hmm.
I think for me, I started to realize how important it is to nourish myself and not just give all the time. Well, it's funny. In my giving, I was being selfish, because I was giving to the work so much
Hmm.
that I was being selfish in the sense of not giving to the people I love and the people who love me. So that's a weird interplay when you think about it.
I mean, okay, it is a weird interplay, fine, I'll give you that. But at the same time, you said something really important about being able to nourish yourself and knowing how important it is to do that. And the thing is that we're in a society where we're caught by like negative connotations of certain interpretations, right? So people think, well, if I take rest or if I do this, that's selfish.
Hmm.
But when you look at what the definition of selfish means, it's to take care of oneself first, which is to me, AKA self care, right? And
Yeah,
so
of
it's
course. Yeah.
all in interpretation and the negative connotations that get associated with it. And so when you talk about nourishing yourself, just think about it like when you take care of yourself and you feel full and alive and abundant and you're good, then it's really easy to spread that to other people. But if you don't have any for yourself, how the heck are you supposed to keep going?
Exactly.
And to give to others. And we get caught in this cycle thinking like it's selfish. I can't do this for myself. I haven't been there for so and so, so I got to give it to them and I got to be nice to them. I got to make sure I handle this. But all while you're getting depleted yourself. And that becomes a huge problem.
Yeah, and so what started happening for me in the fall of 2021 when I was reintegrating and recalibrating was I started not working as much.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And then people who I was working with, you know when people are getting mad at you when the emails are short, you know,
Short and brief. Yep.
as per my last email,
Yep.
that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I was getting a lot of those emails because I was starting to spend a little bit more time with my family, a lot more time with myself.
Hmm.
I was doing a thing where in my condo, we have like a rooftop patio thing. What I was doing, I was just going up there for an hour a day just by myself. A lot of people don't use it.
Yeah.
Like so I was by myself pretty much all the time I'm up there. And I was just like listening to music and rapping, which is like a thing that I did when I was a teenager,
Yes. I remember we
right?
talked about that as well. Okay. That's so good that you had that time.
That's my meditation. Like I would just
Hmm.
go up there and like freestyle about what's going on in my life
Yeah.
and and it would unravel before me.
It's like rap journaling.
Like that's literally what it is.
Yeah.
And that's why I still do it, I
Mhm.
think. And I don't know, plus it's fun. I like it. I'm like mediocre, I think, but but whatever. But I like doing it. But the other thing is I started thinking about what parts of my life that are part of me was I not nourishing properly. And the creative part is one piece. And, I'm also really into sports. So I started to get into sports again. Because of injuries, I can't really play that much anymore. But, I started getting into sports in the sense of just like following them more. And, I started to think about, okay, what if I become like a content creator or like start writing or whatever? And I've kind of been dabbling in that a little bit.
Mhm.
So trying to nourish myself in those ways, connecting with the deepest parts of my identity,
Mhm.
and also spending time with my family, just when they said, hey, let's watch a movie, it became okay and not, I can't tonight because I have such and such thing that I need to do in terms of like a document I need to write or whatever.
Right.
I'm like, I actually just want to be with myself and my family a lot more.
Especially because you have that clarity like, "Hey, this helps nourish me, and nourishment is the most important thing." It trumps everything else. And then because it's so clear and it's in the forefront of your mind, you're really able to keep that in that mind frame. So it's always there when other demands are coming up. You know that your family is never going to be a competing demand. It's always going to be first.
Top priority,
Yeah, top priority.
number one,
Mhm.
always.
Yeah. So, Asante, what would be your key message to the listeners of the show?
I think there are a few
Yeah,
things I can say.
yeah, totally.
One of them is, I'm not sure if I want to phrase it this way, but there's always more going on behind the scenes than what you're seeing. And, I wanted to say that because I think it encompasses a few things that I think I've been talking about today, which is when you're leadership, you are making considerations that others don't have to make, or maybe don't see or understand, or they don't even know those considerations exist. And then you make decisions based on those. And then that's when people don't like your decisions. And the other piece is when you're in public and in the spotlight and you're being put on a pedestal, it's easy for people to imagine that your life isn't hard still, and that you aren't going through things that are difficult, or your relationships, they're not perfect. And, it's hard for people to imagine those pieces. So there's always more going on behind the scenes than what you're seeing. And I think that's really important for everyone to know, so that in our relationships, when people are making decisions that maybe we don't like, or they're letting us down, that we don't yell at them and label them as terrible people, but instead we approach them and say, hey, what's going on? I've noticed A, B, and C is happening. And some of my friends did that with me, and I'm really grateful for that.
So it's like connecting and inquiring instead of just judging and labeling. Connect and inquire. Like, what's going on? I'm noticing these things.
That's it, because nobody wants to be a shitty person, right?
Right.
So if you feel like your sibling, friend, partner, etc., is being a shitty person, there's probably something deeper there, whether it's something that exists in their life currently, something that exists in the past for them, something that they're worried about in the future, something that exists in your relationship, any relationship in their life. There's something there that is impacting their behavior. And if that relationship is valuable to you, it's probably worth it to inquire and figure out what's going on.
Well, those are some really important points that you've highlighted, and I think they're really important for people to take in those messages, because there's always more than what meets the eye, is what you're saying. There's more to what's behind the scenes, right? And making judgments on how things are happening and unfolding are very different than knowing all parts of the puzzle. Every angle that a person stands in is not going to have the same information.
I don't want it to seem like self-important for me to say that I need or want people to engage with me in such a way where I get to have a nuanced conversation about why my decisions are impacting them in a way they don't like.
Yeah, people have a right to their own reactions and emotions and feelings, and they're allowed to have their feelings. But before judging you or making those labels or assumptions, it's nice to check it out first.
And that's it. And if you still don't like it, that's fine too, but at least you have the whole story.
Get the whole story first. Get the facts. Gather those facts and all of that information before you make your final take on how you see things, right?
Right.
Okay. So, what would you say was game changing for you in terms of like inspo? Something that's close to you that reflects your untold story, this part of your untold story. Was there something that sparked for you that got you to that aha place? Like, was there a quote, a book, or a speaker, an event, a thing that got you to recognize, like, okay.
I think there are a variety of things. I think my trip to Vancouver, which was very impromptu and abrupt and kind of secret, you
Yeah.
know, that was an eye opener for me. I love Vancouver after visiting just once. I love it so much. And the thing I love about it is that it feels like people are people there. Toronto is very much obsessed with the grind, especially when you're a young person. Then you go to Vancouver and it's like people just want to go for a hike. People are just engaged with each other in such a way where it's like their relationships matter and they cultivate them. So then I came back, I dove right back into work, like full speed ahead. I worked 26 days straight, like my actual 9 to 5 workplace. I worked 26 days straight.
So it sounds like environment, that the inspo for you, that game changing piece was the environment, the beauty, the relaxation,
Yeah,
the sense of community and cultivating that engagement with yourself and with others. Would you say that that was true for you?
definitely 100%. Around that time, my wife and I got into a pretty significant fight. And that was a real eye opener for me, because what I took from that was I just was not being present enough. And it didn't matter why I wasn't being present enough. I just wasn't being present enough. So the moment I have a chance to pull the plug, I'm going to pull the plug and try to have a more normal, balanced life.
Yeah. So you were starting that journey of awareness, like, okay, so I'm aware this is not working, but I can't just do it prematurely. So I've got to start planning for my exit, or planning for how I'm going to approach things, and what are my paths and what are the openings that I can take advantage of as they come up.
That's exactly it. And the third thing is, my wife and I, we went to watch a movie. The movie theaters were open for like a weekend before Omicron came. And we went to watch a movie, and I think it was based on a true story. It was about this young woman who had postpartum depression, and then she ended up taking her life. And it was very real.
Oh my goodness.
The depiction of the experience of depression and how it impacts the
Yeah.
people around you because they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I like cried for like 5 days after watching that movie because it was so real for me. And what was so real for me was not just what I had experienced in the past, but what I was feeling during that time. And it became really apparent to me that there was something that I needed to deal with. And it wasn't going to be cured by therapy. It had to be cured by changing my lifestyle because that's where it was coming from. And the part of my lifestyle that needed to change was I was working too much. So I had to take a step back.
And then you took a step back.
Then I took a step back.
You did it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so then now I'm curious about what cause or organization has been impactful to you during the course of this journey that you would like to give a shout out to. Who might they be?
It's hard to highlight an organization because there have been so many of them. And I think sometimes it's not necessarily the organization, but the people within the organizations. And there have been so many people, honestly, but I want to shout out my wife for one. She holds me accountable, which is really good. I'm someone who needs that in my life. Otherwise, I kind of run amok a little bit. So she's been super helpful. My brother, who I talk to every single day, has been super helpful. My best friends. I had one conversation with one of my friends, and she really helped me to see where I was at and what were the pressures I was feeling. So I'm not gonna say her name on the podcast, but if she's listening, her initials are LL, so she'll know who she is.
Right, LL, we're giving a shout out to you.
Yeah, and my mom for taking my mind off things. I love that my mom just has her own stuff and her own life, and she'll just call me and tell me about it.
These are your heart connections, and it's in theme of everything that you've been talking about today. That it's not about the organizations, it's about the people. And we're talking about your people right now because that was your aha moment, because it was about making choices, recognizing the choices, making choices, and then really taking that step. And now these are the people that you turn to, that you know you can turn to, that you are turning to, but that you also recognize that that's where the value of your life lies. That's where it is.
That's it.
Right? Your wife, your brother, your best friends, and your mom. And LL.
Yep, exactly.
Amazing. Now, Asante, we have some of your social handles. We've got your website, your Insta, LinkedIn, Twitter. Are there any other platforms that you're findable on, or are those the main ones?
That's it. Those are the main ones.
Okay.
So
your handles will be on the show notes page. So we'll have that for you.
Cool. Appreciate it.
So guess what, Asante?
What's up?
You've just dared yourself to share again. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
How was it to share this part of your journey, this part of your story?
It was amazing. Liberating, I would say. There are things I didn't know I was going to talk about or didn't know that were impacting me as much as they were. See, you're so good at this.
No. This is your story. You had the voice and the courage and the strength to tell it today. So that's the most important thing here. And, I just want to convey to you, Asante, again, how gracious I am to have been able to have this raw and eye-opening conversation with you. You speaking openly and vulnerably about what really happens behind the scenes in leadership from your experience and your journey to connecting to who you are and what you want to achieve within this new outlook, and just keeping all of that in the forefront of your mind. This, for me, has been nothing but inspiring just for me to witness.
Wow.
And I know your story will help many others. So thank you for that deep conversation and for all of the daring and all of the sharing. You rock.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that.
Amazing. Once again, Asante, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.